What's up, everybody? I'm Bob, and I'm an educator and a technologist that's a huge fan of free and open source education. That's why I have developed this course, and I'm developing this open source course on Active Directory. And really, what Active Directory is a powerful cybersecurity tool. And you may be thinking, well, does it let me hack things? No, it's not so much of an attack tool as it is a defensive tool. So the world is on Active Directory. I'm telling you, if an organization runs Windows on the desktop, they've got Active Directory managing those systems. Look it up. You can check it. You can check it out. You can look up job roles, look up jobs learning Active Directory or jobs that require Active Directory. You'll find a lot of them. Many of your companies out there use them, even the big ones like Amazon. So let's go ahead and get started in understanding what you can expect from this series and what you can expect from this video, because we're going to dive right into it with this video. This whole series is going to be done across several weeks, and the focus is on giving you the skill set to secure Active Directory and to even understand its vulnerabilities so that you can protect against attackers, and you can kind of cut attackers off. There's no one-size-fits-all solution for this. So what I really want you to think about is start to get in the habit of keeping up with Active Directory and seeing what Microsoft's doing in the next phase with this product and with this solution. As I'll give you some of the knowledge I have, know that it might change over the years, right? We are talking about an industry, especially cybersecurity, that moves quickly, almost daily. But it does require a baseline understanding. Because even if you want to be an ethical hacker or a penetration tester, really, you have to understand how the systems work. Just because you can hack and crack into something doesn't necessarily mean that you're going to be the most valuable employee or the most valuable candidate for a job or the most valuable contractor. You really have to be able to articulate an understanding of why the system was not secured, why it went down when you issued that attack, things like that. So we're going to start with Active Directory because it's just a great foundation to have and a great skill set to build. So here we go. Active Directory Domain Services is a directory service that Microsoft develops and maintains. Most of your systems, as I said, that out there, organizations and with networks that are running Windows systems are going to use Active Directory. It allows them to control and administer all the systems on their network. Azure, we'll notice, I'll talk about later, is Active Directory in the cloud. So I'm showing you how to kind of set Active Directory up in the cloud, but it's to mimic how it would be set up in an on-premises or in the building environment. I have to tell you about this. Under the hood of Active Directory is a amazing network authentication protocol called Kerberos. And just to kind of give you a shortened summary here, Kerberos grants tickets to authenticated devices that allow that device to be tracked and to access all the resources on the network that it should, right? So I urge you to read all the way through it. Any site I show you, I'm going to put in the description. If I don't, please feel free to comment as well and include your knowledge and your insight on the technology, because many of these things are based on my experience and you all might have different experience. So help out the community. We do have a Discord as well, so if you want to jump in that and share ideas, but start with the comments. Start interacting with each other in there too. That'll add to it. All right, Azure. So Azure Active Directory is Microsoft's, baby. This is the new thing for Microsoft, and they're working on it heavily to really push people towards it. Even as you'll see in this install, once we get to it, that Active Directory is moving to the cloud. There's even features where you can connect Active Directory to Azure. So if you have on-prem and not Azure, there's a tool to connect it to Azure to kind of expand the feature set. Because Azure exists really so that Microsoft can start employing these amazing machine learning technologies and artificial intelligence in these type of IT operations, to one day enable new features, new things we haven't heard of. One of the things that came out recently, at least in my awareness, is Cortana can sort through email and actually create to-do lists automatically for you. So really this is about IT automation when you think about Azure. And that'll be for another course. I'll be doing an IT automation course. However, I'm going to go ahead and start to show you the setting up of the setting up of Active Directory inside of AWS. So here I am in AWS. This is an educational lab. It's not a production system, so I wouldn't ever put anything up here that I would be making money off per se, or that I would put in production. But it is everything that AWS offers, and I'm in the Elastic Compute service, which is essentially a hypervisor. And if you don't know what a hypervisor is, it's just a virtualization server or virtualization technology that allows you to manage multiple systems on a single piece of hardware or on a clustered piece of hardware. It really lets you more effectively and efficiently maximize the use of hardware. And this interface you're looking at here that's all around me it's the login interface and in the user interface, which is essentially my interface to the hypervisor, which allows me to create instances. And if you want to know how to create an instance, I did that in a video prior, so check that out. Or if you need help, go ahead and feel free to shoot me an email or a message in Discord or a comment below, and I'll help with whatever you're trying to do. But overall, I would try to get on AWS, whether you're paying for it or not. Start with AWS Educate, see if you're eligible to sign up and get some free credits to go ahead and get this cloud-based lab environment. So here I am getting ready to connect to it. I'm going to hit connect. You'll notice I can download an RDP client. I can also get my password, which my password is encrypted currently, and I'm going to use a decryption key for it. So decrypt the password. It's okay if you know that password. By the time you see this, the system will no longer be up and running. I will have removed it by then. So copied it in RAM just so when I open up the remote connection, I can put in the password. So what just happened there? You might be thinking. We have to start reverse engineering processes in our mind to understand how we can secure them and also understand how an attacker might be trying to manipulate the process. So RDP, the Remote Desktop Protocol, uses port 3389. So when you use remote desktop connection, and I'm connecting over the internet to this AWS instance or this Windows Server instance running in AWS, my system, my laptop's Remote Desktop Protocol, connected to it on the port 3389, because that's what that server was listening for remote connections on. That server then gave me back a web form which asked for the username and password. So then I'm going to paste in, right? I mean, how much more of an explanation is needed for a login process, right? So I can get a little long-winded, but I really hope you learn from some of my ramblings. All right, so I'm logging in. You'll notice that it's dark. Oh, goodness, I'm scared. It is October, after all, here, and during the making of this video. But what's happening right now is I'm logging into the server, and this happens on every Windows system, is it's creating a profile for me, which is essentially a folder that's on the C drive in the users directory that has all my preferences. Like, that's where all my files get saved by default. You know, when I right click and create new folder on the desktop and it pops up. Really, I don't mean to burst your bubble, but all this is right here is a folder, right? And the background is a JPEG or some picture file that, you know, you can set as your wallpaper, right? So it's kind of an interesting thing to think about, is this is just the file system, you know, over top, a GUI's laying on top of it, I guess you could say. So that's just thinking through it systematically and what you're actually working with. Try to get in that habit. Try to understand it. Be curious about it. Don't try to rush through. All right, at this point, normally if I was setting this up in a normal environment, what I would do is, you may not be able to see this, let me move this upward so you can. But yes, down here, which I was just blocking, is the network connection settings. And even actually up here too, you'll notice that Amazon is nice enough to add some fantastic IP address information and other system information that gives us insight as to what we're on, what we're doing, what is this system for. Especially if this would be especially useful if you're managing multiple systems at once. So normally, if I was in an on-premises server, I would not have this up here. I also would not have an IP address already, because this computer, as you can see there, already has an IP up there. And then I normally would go here, right-click that, and go to network settings, adapter settings, and then give it a static IP address, because you want your servers to have a static IP, because a lot of devices rely on them to operate. Especially we're seeing where this is Active Directory. Now, I'm not going to do that today because I'm in AWS and this is a demonstration, but I just want you to know in an on-premises environment, if you're setting up a domain controller, you want to keep in mind it should get a static, unless you're really, really familiar with DHCP and you're going to manage your pools correctly. But I wouldn't risk having that IP address change on you, right? Because if it changed, then all the systems are like, okay, I don't know where that is anymore, and people couldn't log in, and you'd have an issue, right? Okay, so first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to start installing. So I'm going to open up Server Manager, which is a very popular tool within the Windows Server domain. All right, so Microsoft has made server operating systems and the GUI experience very easy. I mean, they even give you a step-by-step right here. I'm going to skip configure this local server. I've already done that. AWS helped automate a lot of that. And AWS is very much an IT automation that kind of helps us IT professionals do away with all those mundane tasks and get to the new stuff. So when we look at adding roles and features, this is where we're going to go. Go next. Next, we're going to do a role-based install. If I had more than one server right now, I could actually install the same service across multiple devices, but I only have one right now. And we do have these systems. We are going to make our cloud network bigger, so there's going to be more servers eventually, and then there's going to be, one I'm going to treat like a client that we would manage using Active Directory. So next to that, Active Directory Domain Services. That's what we're going to install. Keep going. Next through that. Here's what I was talking about earlier. This is Azure's Active Directory Sync tool, or DirSync, which would allow an on-premises Active Directory system to connect with an in the cloud Azure tenant. That's what they call their instances. AWS calls it an instance. Azure calls it a tenant. And the tenant is the cloud-based install of AD. And it's got a little bit more features than the on-prem AD. So we're going to next do that. We're going to say, yes, you can go ahead and reboot if you want, if you need it. So we're going to install that. And what's happening now is it's really just installing the tools in Windows Server that you can use to manage Active Directory. And I do need you to know that PowerShell is a part of this course as well. So over time, after I show you all the GUI tools, I'm going to start kind of, pushing you towards PowerShell in Active Directory, because that's going to be one of the things that will help out in a job and help you kind of speed up the process of, setting up users or groups or a massive group and script it out and automate some of the mundane tasks with managing Active Directory. Also, you got to know that that's probably where attackers are going to try too. That's a whole threat vector is PowerShell. All right, so it is installing all the tools to manage it. One of them is going to be Active Directory users and computers. We won't open that tool until we have promoted this system to a domain controller, because that'll be the next step in the install process. I do got to say, Microsoft makes their tools pretty easy to set up for the first time as long as you kind of understand what you're doing. So you can go right here to this hyperlink. It'll take you to another installer. You got to add a new forest, and we're going to call this ltn.internal. You can call it whatever you want. Best business practice is to own a domain. You can go look up Microsoft's best practices on that. They want you to have a domain that already exists on the web, and you can name it after that. So to go next, because many of the massive multiplayer online games, they use Active Directory. I mean, a lot of services that you think, if you can think of a system that a lot of people log into, they're probably going to be using Active Directory for all that authentication. Again, it doesn't have many competitors. I would look at it, and I'm sure you'll see some out there, but they're not as relevant. That's one thing we can say. We can pick fun at Microsoft, or we can appreciate how well they've done in mass adoption of their own technology. So they've really been successful in getting organizations and people to adopt their tech. Part of it was forceful, through their licensing in the early days, but a lot of it is just manageability is pretty straightforward and simple. So these are the 3 locations you should definitely know about. The database of Active Directory, and that's really what it is on the back end, is a database of resources, syslog folder, log files. So back these up. You could use a tool like Veeam. They make some they make specific Active Directory backup tools. All right, just doing the prerequisite check, and if you get any errors here, you got to troubleshoot. You might not have given the system an IP address, or it doesn't have a network connection. There's a plethora of things that could cause it to fail, but in this case it didn't, right? We got it successfully. I want to walk you through the right steps, but I need you to understand, if it does fail, it's not that Microsoft's broken, it's not that the computer's stupid, it's that we got to troubleshoot, right? So hit install. As this process happens, what you need to know is it's building the database structure right now. It's creating those relationships, it's creating those tables, and we're not interacting directly with the database. We're going to be using the tools that are designed for a very specific purpose, like to create a user or to create a group. And before the end of this video and this lesson, I am going to go ahead and show you how to make OUs and how to create a user and a group. And then that's when we'll end. So let's let this finish. Once this finishes, this is going to have to actually reboot. And when it reboots, we'll lose connection because obviously we're connected over the internet to it. So it's going to power off. Therefore, remote desktop protocol is going to stop altogether. So I'm going to just exit out here because we are going to see a reboot occur. There we go. I'll let it kick me out. Here we are back in AWS. So I guess in the meantime, as that's coming back up, we'll give it a few seconds. I'll give you the time to think about the cloud. Think about what your understanding of it is. It's really just a system in a data center. And I know you've heard of the saying, the cloud is just somebody else's computer. True, but it's a little bit more complicated than that. I mean, we're talking about these sophisticated, interconnected data centers run by this huge company, Amazon, and they're managing this platform that anyone who's going to pay for it, or anyone who's a student, can log into and use to set up an IT infrastructure in the cloud. So all we needed for this was an internet connection to get to AWS. Everything else, the network, the hardware, the power, you name it, the software was all on their end. It's like, it's like kind of like when you're paying rent to live somewhere. You don't necessarily own the environment or the infrastructure. You only own the things in it. So this is what that is. I mean, it's like you're renting out a servers. You're renting out a network. You're renting out all this. And companies are going that way because it's so much more flexible. Game developers are building their platforms on the cloud because they can scale it. They don't have to update all these nodes across the world. They just one update, one place, and the feature's there. Everyone just has to connect to it. And that's why internet connections have to get better. So we're going to hit open. Should be back up at this point. Yep. And what told me it was back up is that I actually got a login page. If I didn't get a login page, if I got an error message, then I would have to wait. Or I'd have to see what I was doing wrong, right? I'm not gonna act like I don't make mistakes, right? We all make mistakes. Okay, so Active Directory is currently installed, but we're not done yet. We got to go ahead and I want to show you something here. So we're gonna search Active Directory users and computers. So we live in a search-centric world, as my good friend Rob Muhlenstein. He's a brilliant man, a programmer, longtime developer for IBM. Did some work in virtual reality. It really, I don't want to even try to introduce him because he's got so many skills. He's made an impact on so many people. But check him out. I'll put his information. He does stream on Twitch. I'll put his information down in the description. All right. So again, we live in a search-centric world, as Rob says, and so use it, right? We have no problem Google searching. Why don't we search our own operating system? You don't have to know exactly where every program is and where this is and that and where this is in your file system. Just search for it, right? So we'll go, here's the structure. And now in Active Directory users and computers, that's probably where you would spend your most time managing and using Active Directory. So underneath the ltn.internal domain, or the forest, are OUs. And for now, I want you to know that an OU is a container for Active Directory objects. I'll give you a few examples of objects that can be found in Active Directory. Computer accounts, user accounts, group accounts, and printers. I'm just going to give you that for now. There's a lot of different objects. I just don't want to provide information overload. All right, so I'm going to go ahead and show you how to set up an OU structure. And once we're done with that OU structure, I'll show you the users, setting up a user, and all that. And then this video will come to a close because you'll have enough to learn at that point. Or you'll have enough at that point, and we'll go on to the next. So here we're going to create an OU. And I'm going to create it based on a site. So we're going to call that Texas. Underneath Texas, we have departmental OUs. So this is my site. I'm going to say in Texas, we have engineering and R&D. So we'll say ENG, just to shorten it. And notice this right here. Every OU starts with this, just in case. Because if you deleted an OU, you could delete a whole profile of configurations for a whole building or a whole department, and it's not going to be a good look. So you don't want to delete. Therefore, they have that option. It's kind of, I guess you could say, idiot proof, because I couldn't drag and drop OU by accident and mess everything up or accidentally delete something. They really want you to know what you're doing to delete. And the way you would delete one is you go up here to View, you go to View, Advanced Features. You'll see more options pop up. You can watch when you right click Properties. Under the object, you can uncheck that and then go ahead and delete it. But we're not going to do that. I'm going to provide less here. We're not going to do that today in terms of deleting the OU. So let's go ahead and create one other OU, which was for the R&D department, Research and Development. So we'll do R&D, hit OK. And here's one more thing, right, about OUs. You don't want to go too deep in the structure. Like, you don't want to go have 10 levels of OU. But under each departmental OU, we're going to have 2 sub-OUs. And I'll tell you what those are, and I'll explain why I'm doing this the way I am. So I'm doing users and groups. And then the other one is going to be computers. All right, why? Because really, OUs are there to have group policies applied to them. A group policy is a way, or a configuration, or a list of configuration settings, customized configuration settings for a computer that you apply to an OU or to a user. You apply it to an OU so that it can be applied to either users or computers. So there's 2 different types of group policy: user configuration and computer configuration. User configuration affects the user logged in. Computer configuration affects the entire computer regardless of who's logged in. And in a later video, I will show you the creation and the application of a group policy. Just know for now, your structure should be reflective in preparation for using group policy. So under users and groups, I'm going to create a user in a group just to show you. So we're going to pick Jim. Jim just got hired. Jim Jimmerstein. J.Jimmerstein is going to be our naming convention, and you should have a naming convention for your users. So, when a user comes on, HR tells IT to add a user, right? And typically you're going to create the username based on what the rest of the company follows, the naming convention, because you want to make it kind of an easy process to log in, not something overly complicated. So notice the first option checked here. It says user must change password at next logon. What does that mean? Well, it's not our job as IT and cybersecurity professionals to remember everybody's passwords. All right, it just isn't. It's not really practical. I mean, I can't remember all those passwords. If you're managing a network of 1,000 or more users, I mean, come on. So this is for the initial call, and I would recommend doing it in a call where you tell the user, if you don't have an automated process for the setup of the user and it can't just already be done in a web form, that you call and you say, hey Jim, Jim calls you and you say, hey Jim, how you doing? I got your new account set up and the temporary password is this. You log in, he logs in, and it prompts him to change his password. So guess what? Then the responsibility is on him to remember his password. So we're going to go ahead and give him a good old trusty password for initial logon. And there you go. We got our first user. So this would happen over time as people get hired and even let go or leave. You would disable them, right? But groups are an extra important thing. What is a group? Well, it's a collection of users. So anybody in the engineering department will be added to the engineering group. So you could do it from here. Members, I would add Jim, right? So I'm going to try to shorten that and hit check, see if it discovers it. And sure enough, it filled it. But if I had a big, huge database of users, there might be a few Jims. Let's see how I checked it just to speed it up. Applied, and this is where you would add all the users to that group. But what for, you might be wondering? Well, when you start creating resources like printers and accessing ink, whether it's color or whatever, file shares, access to databases and applications, you're really going to limit access based on groups because it's much easier to manage those permissions lists using groups than just solely users. So I will say this, and this will be my last thing before the end of this video. Attackers are going for the domain admin account. They want to get what's called domain administrator privileges, which means that the domain administrator can do anything they want on the entire Active Directory system. They can add their stuff, they can delete OUs, they can do everything we're doing right now, because guess what? When we first promoted this system to a domain controller, the default administrator account that I'm logged into right now became a member of the domain admins group. And that's an ultimate privilege should you get it, should it be bestowed upon thee, right, at the organization you're at. I would say with great power comes great responsibility, and to whom much is given, much is required. So do not use that sparingly. Consider yourself a target now that you're a domain admin, because attackers, they want that account, and it's your responsibility to keep it secure. And that's what this whole video series is about. I'm really excited to learn alongside you all and help you understand it based on what I know about it, and that is Active Directory. I'll see you in the next video. Feel free to join us on Discord if you want to talk about this one. Have a good one. Bye.